Reading passage 1. You should spend about 20 minutes on questions 1 to 13, which are based on reading passage 1 below. Raising the Mary Rose. How a 16th century warship was recovered from the seabed. On 19 July 1545, English and French fleets were engaged in a sea battle off the coast of southern England in the area of water called the Solent, between Portsmouth and the Isle of Wight. Among the English vessels was a warship by the name Mary Rose. Built in Portsmouth some 35 years earlier, she had had a long and successful fighting career and was the favorite of King Henry VIII. Accounts of what happened to the ship vary. While witnesses agree that she was not hit by the French, some maintain that she was outdated, overladen, and sailing too low in the water. Others that she was mishandled by undisciplined crew. What is undisputed, however, is that the Mary Rose sank into the Solent that day and taking at least 500 men with her. After the battle, attempts were made to recover the ship, but these failed. The Mary Rose came to rest on the seabed, lying on her starboard right side at an angle of approximately 60 degrees. The hull, the body of the ship, acted as a trap for the sand and mud carried by solent currents. As a result, the starboard side filled rapidly, and leaving the exposed port left side and to be eroded by marine organisms and mechanical degradation. Because of the way the ship sank, nearly all of the starboard half survived intact. During the 17th and 18th centuries, the entire site became covered with a layer of hard grey clay, which minimized further erosion. Then, on 16 June 1836, some fishermen in the Solent found that their equipment was caught on an underwater obstruction, which turned out to be the Mary Rose. Diver John Dane happened to be exploring another sunken ship nearby, and the fishermen approached him asking him to free their gear. Dane David and Dane dived down and found the equipment caught on a timber protruding slightly from the seabed. Exploring further, he uncovered several other timbers and a bronze gun. Dane continued diving on the site intermittently until 1840, recovering several more guns, two bows, various timbers, part of a pump, and various other small finds. The Mary Rose then faded into obscurity for another 100 years, but in 1965, military historian and amateur diver Alexander McKee, in conjunction with the British Sub-Aqua Club, initiated a project called Solent Ships. While on paper, this was a plan to examine a number of known tracks in the Solent, what McKee really hoped for was to find the Mary Rose. Ordinary search techniques proved unsatisfactory, so McKay entered into collaboration with Harold E. Egerton, a professor of electrical engineering at the Massachusetts Massachusetts Institute of Technology. In 1967, Edgerton Egerton's side-scan sonar system revealed a large, unusually shaped object which McKee believed was the Mary Rose. Further excavations revealed stray pieces of timber and an iron gun, but the climax to the operation came when, on 5 May 1971, part of ship's named ship's frame was uncovered. McKee and his team now knew for certain that they had found the wreck, but were as yet unaware and that it also housed a treasure trove of beautifully preserved artifacts. Interest in the project grew, and in 1979, the Mary Rose Trust was formed with Prince Charles as its president and Doctor Margaret Rule, its archaeological director. The decision whether or not to salvage the wreck was not an easy one, although an excavation in 1978 had shown that it might be possible to raise the hull. While the original aim was to raise the hull, if at all, if at all feasible, the operation was not given the go-ahead until January 1982, when all the necessary information was available. An important factor in trying to salvage the Mary Rose was that the remaining hull was an open shell. Sorry. And this led to an important decision being taken, namely to carry out the lifting operation in three very distant stages. The hull was attached to a lifting frame via a network of bolts and lifting wires. The problem of the hull being sucked back and downwards into the mud was overcome by using 12 hydraulic jacks. These raised in a few centimeters over a period of several days. As the lifting frame rose slowly up its four legs, it was only when the hull was hanging freely up from the lifting frame, clear of the seabed and the suction effect of the surrounding mud, that the salvage operation progressed to the second stage. In this stage, the lifting frame was fixed to a hook attached to a crane, and the hull was lifted completely clear of the seabed and transferred underwater into the lifting cradle. This required precise positioning to locate the legs into the stabbing guides of the lifting cradle. The lifting cradle was designed to fit the hull using archaeological survey drawings and was fitted with airbags to provide additional cushioning for the hull's delicate timber framework. The third and the final stage was to lift the entire structure into the air, by which time the hull was also supported from below. Finally, on 11 October 1982, millions of people around the world held their breath as the timber skeleton of the Mary Rose was lifted clear of the water. ready to be returned home to Portsmouth. What destroyed the civilization of Eastern Ireland? Reading passages 2. You should spend about 20 minutes on questions 14 to 26, which are based on reading passages 2 on the following pages. What destroyed the civilization of Eastern Ireland? Eastern Ireland, or Rapu Nui, as it is known locally, is home to several hundred ancient human statues. The Moi, the Moi, after this remote Pacific island was settled by the Polynesians, it remained isolated for centuries. All the energy and resources that went into the Moi, some of which are 10 meters tall and weigh over 7,000 kilos, came from the island itself. Yet, when Dutch explorers landed in 1722, they met a Stone Age culture. The Moi were carved with stone tools and then transported for many kilometers without the use of animals or wheels to massive stone platforms. The identity of the Moi builders was in doubt until well into the 16th century. Thor Heyerdahl Thor Heyerdahl, the Norwegian ethnographer and adventurer, thought the statues had been created by pre-Inca peoples from Peru. Best-selling Swiss author Erich Erich von Däniken believed they were built by ascertained extraterrestrials. A modern science, linguistic, archaeological, and genetic evidence has definitely proved the Moai builders were Polynesians, but not how they saved their creations, but how they moved their creations. Local folklore maintains that the statues walked, while researchers have tended to assume the ancestors dragged the statues somehow using ropes and logs. When the Europeans arrived, Rapa Nui was grassland with only a few uh, Socrani trees. In the 1970s and 1980s, though, researchers found pollen preserved in lake sediments which proved the island um, had been covered in lush palm forests for thousands of years. Only after the Polynesians arrived did those forests disappear. U.S. scientist Jared Diamond believes that the Rapa Nui people, descendants of Polynesian settlers, wrecked their own environment. They had unfortunately settled on an extremely fragile island, dry, cool, and too remote to be properly fertilized by wind-blown volcanic ash. When the islanders cleared the forests for firewood and farming, the forests didn't grow back. as the trees became scarce and they could no longer construct wooden canoes for fishing, they ate birds. Soil erosion decreased their crop yields. Before Europeans arrived, the Rapa Nui had descended into civil war and cannibalism. The he maintains and cannibalism he maintains the collapse of their isolated civilization on Diamond Rights is a worst-case scenario for what may lie ahead of us in our own future. The Moi, he thinks, accelerated the self-destruction. Diamond interprets them as power displays by rival chieftains who, trapped on a remote little island, lacked other ways of asserting their dominance. They competed by building ever bigger figures. Diamond thinks they laid the Moi on wooden sledges, hauled over log rails, but that required both a lot of wood and a lot of people. To feed the people, even more land had to be cleared. When the wood was gone and civil war began, the islanders began toppling the Moi. By the 19th century, none were standing. Archaeologists Terry Hunt of the University of Hawaii and Carl Lippo of California State University agree that Easter Island lost its lush forest and that it was an ecological catastrophe, but they believe the islanders themselves weren't to blame, and the Mois certainly weren't. Archaeological excavations indicate that the Rapa Nui went into heroic efforts to protect the resources of their wind-lashed infertile fields. They built thousands of circular stone windbreaks and gardened inside them and used broken volcanic rocks and to keep the soil moist. In short, Hunt and Filippo argue the prehistoric Rapa Nui were pioneers of sustainable farming. Hunt and Filippo counted that Moi building was an activity that helped keep the peace between islanders. They also believe that moving the Moi required few people and no wood, because they were walked upright. On that issue, Hunt and Filippo say archaeological evidence backs up Papua Nui folklore. Recent experiments indicate that as few as 18 people could, with strong ropes and a bit of practice, easily maneuver a 1,000 kilogram Moi replica a few hundred meters. The fat bellies, the figure's fat bellies and um, tilted them forward, and a D-shaped base allowed handlers to roll and rock them side to side. Moreover, Hunt and Lippo are convinced that the settlers were not wholly responsible for the loss of the island's trees. Archaeological finds of nuts from the extinct Easter Island palm show tiny grooves made by the teeth of Polynesian rats. The rats arrived along with settlers, and in just a few years, Hunt and Lippo calculate they would have overrun the island, and they would have prevented the reseeding of the slow-growing palm trees and thereby doomed Papua Nui's forest. Even without the settlers' campaign of deforestation, no doubt the rats ate birds' eggs too. Hunt and Tulipo also see no evidence that Rapa Nui civilization collapsed when the palm forest did. They think its population grew rapidly and then remained more or less stable until the arrival of the Europeans, who introduced deadly diseases and to which islanders had no immunity. Then in the 19th century, slave traders decimated the population, which shriveled to 111 people by 1877. Hunt and Telepo's vision, therefore, is one of an island populated by peaceful and ingenious Moai builders and careful stewards of the land, rather than by reckless destroyers ruining their own environment and society. Rather than a case of abject failure, um, Rapa Nui is an unlikely story of success, they claim. Whichever is the case, there are surely some valuable lessons which the world at large can learn from the story of Rapa Nui. Reading passage 3, she should spend about 20 minutes on questions 27 to 40, which are based on reading passage 3 below. Neuroaesthetics. An emerging discipline called neuroaesthetics is seeking to bring scientific objectivity to the study of art and has already given us a better understanding of many masterpieces. And the blurred imagery of impressionist paintings seems to stimulate the brain's amyg- amygdala. For instance, and since the amygdala plays a crucial role in our feelings, that finding might explain why many people find these pieces so moving. Could the same approach also shed light on abstract 20th century pieces from um, Mondrian's geometrical blocks of color to Pollock's seemingly haphazard arrangements of splashed paint on canvas? Skeptics believe that the people claim to like such works simply because they are famous. We certainly do have an inclination to follow the crowd when asked to make a perceptual, simple perceptual decisions such as matching a shape to its rotated image. For example, people often choose a definitely wrong answer if they see others are doing the same. It is easy to imagine that this mentality would have even more impact on fuzzy concepts like art appreciation, where there is no right or wrong answer. Angelina Holley Dolan of Boston College, Massachusetts, responded to this debate by asking volunteers to view pairs of paintings, either the creations of famous abstract artists or the doodles of infants, chimps, and elephants. They then had to judge which they preferred. A third of the paintings were given to no captions, while many were labeled incorrectly. Volunteers might think they were viewing a chimp's messy brushstrokes when they were actually seeing an acclaimed masterpiece. In each set of trials, volunteers generally preferred the work of renowned artists, even when they believed it was by an animal or a child. It seems that the interviewer can sense the artist's vision in paintings, even if they can't explain why. Robert Repperell, an artist based at Cardiff University, creates ambiguous works that are neither entirely abstract nor clearly representational. In one study, Pepperell and his collaborators asked the volunteers to decide how powerful they considered an artwork to be and whether they saw anything familiar in the piece. The longer they took to answer these questions, the more highly they rated the piece uh, under scrutiny, and the greater their neural activity. It would seem that the brain sees these images as puzzles, and the harder it is to decipher the meaning, the more rewarding is the moment of recognition. And what about artists such as Mondrian, whose paintings consist exclusively of horizontal and vertical lines encasing blocks of color? Mondrian's Montian's works are deceptively simple, but eye-tracking studies confirm that they are meticulously composed and that simply rotating a piece radically changes the way we view it. With the original volunteers' eyes tended to stay longer on certain places in the image, but with the altered versions, they would flit across the piece more rapidly. As a result, the volunteers considered the altered version less pleasurable when they later rated the work. In a similar study, Oshin Vartanian of Toronto University asked volunteers to compare original paintings with others which he had altered by moving objects around within the frame. He found that almost everyone preferred the original, whether it was a Van Gogh, a still life, or an abstract by Miro. Vartanian also found that changing the composition of the paintings reduced activation in those brain areas linked with meaning and interpretation. In another experiment, Alex Forsyth, Forsyth, Forsyth of the University of Liverpool analyzed the visual intricacy of different pieces of art, and her results and her results suggest that many artists use a key level of detail to please the brain. Too little and the work is boring, but too much results in a kind of perceptual overload, according to Forsyth. What is more appealing, pieces, both abstract and representational, show signs of fractals, repeated motifs recurring in different scales. Fractals are common throughout nature, for example, in the shapes of mountain peaks or the branches of trees. It is possible that our visual system, which evolved in the great outdoors, finds it easier to process such patterns. It is also intriguing that the brain appears to process movement when we see a handwritten letter, as if we are replaying the writer's moment of creation. This has led some to wonder whether Pollock's works feel so dynamic because the brain constructs the energetic actions the artist used as he painted. This may be down to our brain's mirror neurons, which are known to mimic others' actions. The hypothesis will need to be thoroughly tested, however. It might even be the case that we could use neuroaesthetic studies to understand the longevity of some pieces of artwork, while the fashions of the time might shape what is currently popular. Works that are best adapted to our visual system may be the most likely to linger once the trends of previous generations have been forgotten. It's still early days of the field of neuroaesthetics, and these studies are probably only a state of what is to come. It would, however, be foolish to reduce art appreciation into a set of scientific laws. We shouldn't underestimate the importance of the style of particular artists and their place in history and the artistic environment of the time. Abstract art offers both the challenge and the freedom to play with different interpretations. In some ways, it's not so different to science when we are constantly looking for systems and decoding meaning so that we can view and appreciate the world in a new way.